On June the 23rd, 2016, Britain will hold a referendum to decide on whether the time has come to leave the EU. Even though it may seem that there are some pretty good reasons for leaving, I believe the right decision is to stay. My name's Paul Wilkinson and I'm a British EU citizen. I live in Finland. Because Finland is an EU country, it's as easy for me to work here as it is in Britain. A recent survey shows that there are 2.5 million British citizens like myself living and working in the EU. Many have no right to vote in this referendum due to British electoral rules. If we had, we would be voting to remain. We know that life is pretty good as a member of the EU. When you actually live as a European, you appreciate the opportunities brought from having a single currency as well as borderless travel. Those hoping for a Brexit on June the 23rd may feel that a win signifies the end of legislation. It's true that in Brussels there are civil servants, lobby groups and players of influence. Many are unelected, but there are also many members of the European Parliament affecting major policy on a daily basis. They were elected by people like you and me. I mention this because 65% of eligible British voters failed to show up at the last EU elections. It seems a bit rich to complain about a lack of democracy in Europe when you can't be asked to vote because the issues at stake require a little effort to learn about. One thing that the Brexit campaign understands correctly is that people in Britain fear Europe. And the best way to stir up a British electorate into a fiery passion of voting action is to rekindle Second World War patriotic values. To become a successful Brexit campaigner in this referendum, simply don a Union Jack waistcoat, hold a pint of beer in hand, and passionately quote a bit of Churchill in front of the cameras. Cheers! It just might work for you. Now, although having this referendum is a good thing, the UK version of democracy generally is rather pitiful. In a republic such as Finland, a president will be democratically elected. By comparison, Britain's monarchy is unelected. It's sad that so many people only ever see the Queen as a favourite granny to dote on. Admittedly, the institution she represents is not a tyranny on a par with a North Korean dictator, but the British monarchy's stranglehold on democracy does run deep. Look around if you don't believe me. Her face is on your money, she is mentioned in your passports, and she is exalted in the national anthem. When other countries sing about the virtues of the nation, Britain venerates this unelected official. God save the Queen. Note, one law can be passed in Britain without the monarchy's approval. She can install people in the House of Lords without the fuss of accountability or election. She is above prosecution and as Commander-in-Chief has the loyalty of the armed forces. Every recruit swears an oath to her alone. No part of the oath is about defence of the country, only the monarchy. If you actually believe that Queen and country are the same, then you have been fooled. God save the Queen. Did you know that an EU law is the only law that can be introduced in Britain that may not directly benefit the unelected royal family? And did you know that despite what the Brexit campaign will want you to believe, not all EU laws are actually bad. In fact, many of them are rather good. They deal with things like human rights, the environment, and health and safety. When Queen Elizabeth dies, she will be replaced by a new unelected member of the royal household. And if this person decides that Britain's interests lie in a different direction to your way of thinking, you may want to have the EU there to help you change things at home. Another argument for an exit concerns the price of membership. Britain is the second biggest contributor to the EU after Germany. This means that Britain has a strong influence on EU policy. Over the past 40 years, Germany and Britain have helped to steer the European Union towards ever greater prosperity. And for more than 70 years, there has not been a war between these two very domineering countries. When it comes to bloodthirsty nationalistic ruthlessness, both Germany and Britain have had their darker moments. Together, They just might be able to stem each other's appetites for destruction and save the world instead. How do you put a price on that? Now, if you think I'm exaggerating about British ruthlessness, you only need to look as far as the British Army, who is in every hotspot around the world. If the British Army can be reined in, there would perhaps be less conflict and fewer streams of refugees flooding into Europe. It was not Germany who invaded Iran and Afghanistan, nor was it the Germans dropping bombs on Syria. Yet it is seen as a German problem and not a British one when the refugees arrive. Leaving the EU because of immigration issues is pathetic, inhuman and cruel. I am convinced that Britain's success lies within the EU and that the Brexit concerns can be solved internally. It's a win-win situation. It would be an enormous tragedy for Britain if the country decided not to remain at the table when it comes to defining EU policy in years to come. The EU will not disappear just because Britain leaves. If you have a chance to vote on June the 23rd, make your vote count for peace and prosperity and not isolation. Thank you for listening. My rant is over.